Hi, I'm Dr. Marc Mednick. I'm a licensed psychologist and expert on family disputes. I've been doing this work for over 30 years, helping parents split up, doing what's best for their kids, working with entire families, trying to help them get through this very difficult time. A couple of things stick out. One is how lonely this can feel. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, young or old, whether this relationship is long-term or short-term, how you got together. The point is, right now, you may feel really up against it. Most people feel like they're making this transition completely and utterly alone. Even if that's not true, that's very often how it feels. Even if you have a support system around you, you can feel like you're the only one going through this. You don't know where to turn. You don't know what to ask. You don't know what the answers are that you're looking for. When you remove someone who's been your other half of your life, it leaves this chasm, especially if you're both responsible for kids that you're creating together. Everybody's in the middle of this messy time. You're not sure what to do with your kids. You're not sure how they're going to react. You're not sure how to handle this thing called a divorce. So that's why I decided to create this podcast. We're calling it Make Sense of the Mess. Each episode, we're going to take on a different question, some big conundrum that you face as a co-parent, some very important issues that you must handle in the early stages of a divorce. And we're going to break down those questions with the hope that you'll walk away with some better handholds. Specifically 4 C's: clarity, courage, context, and community to work through this very messy time. So here is how it's going to work. In each episode, we're going to take on some new topic, something that is timely for you, something that is really urgent and necessary for you to attend to, that you need some answers with. How are we going to do that? We're going to invite some real-life people who are going through what you're going through. We're also going to invite some experts in the field to discuss kind of the best things to do, say, not do, not say. And together, we're going to really plumb the depths of these issues so that you get a much better handle on what to do and how to do it. So this is not something you're going to go through alone. You're going to have us to take with you along the way. Buckle up and join us. So glad you found this show. Together, let's make sense of the mess. So for this episode, we're going to talk about what to do now that you're faced with a divorce. And I want to start by talking about something that people may disagree with, but I really feel strongly about this. In the early stages here, when you're confronted with the idea of a divorce, you may have said or done some things that you regret or wish to take back. You know, you can try that. I think it's time, because the conversations are so difficult, for you to go back and redo the conversation with your spouse or partner. Try again and say, look, this was really hard. I feel blindsided by the conversation. I was overwhelmed. I reacted poorly. Could we have the conversation again? Could we start again? If you can clean slate this at the beginning, I think it's a big deal, which is why when I'm giving advice here about what to do now that you know about divorce, I really want to drive home the point that most things are changeable until they're not. So if you need to revisit this, do it. It's essential for your own well-being, for the well-being of the relationship, and really it's a caring and considerate thing to do for and with your spouse or partner. Don't feel locked into a decision just because you've already made a decision or you think you have. If you're the one initiating divorce, you can always change your mind. You can do that. That's okay. This is your life. It's no one else's life. If you're considering ending a relationship, it's a big deal. If you're the one who's been told the relationship is ending, you're probably overwhelmed and you've overreacted or underreacted to being told. It's not a conversation that's pleasant, and none of us know how we're going to respond or react when we're confronted with this. On both sides. And I don't care how much you think you've rehearsed the conversation, you've gone over it, now that you've had the conversation, it didn't go, start again. You can always say, look, we need to really think about this. We need to work through this and figure out what we're doing. That's okay. It's always okay to have that conversation until you come to the point where it's no longer working. Please give yourself permission to do that. So that leads me to one of the first things to do here. First bit of advice is don't do or say anything rash. It's time to get perspective. Talk to people that you trust implicitly. And I really mean implicitly, meaning that's a person who knows you, your values, who you really are inside. They know where all your trigger points are, your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities, how you're likely to respond. They know when you clam up, when you get defensive, and they can talk to you about it. They are your truth teller. You want the truth tellers in your life to talk to you about what's happening here. The truth teller is somebody in your life you can talk to, and they will tolerate how upset or angry or hurt you are. They understand your pain, but they won't be ruled and governed by your emotional reaction. They'll be able to step back. Sometimes that's really annoying when you have a friend or a family member like that. They have perspective. They're logical. They think things out. That's who you want. Here's what you don't want. You don't want someone who's going to pour kerosene on an open flame. Somebody who's so protective of you. They love you so much and want the best for you that they will be defensive on your behalf. You need to get a lawyer. We're gonna get the toughest lawyer we can find. We're really gonna make them pay. Nah, you need somebody who's gonna be able to step back from that kind of defensiveness and help you to do the same. This person is your touchstone. This is a person that will look at your best interest in the long term, not just right now. They're not gonna react to how terrible you're feeling. They'll help you step back, help you take a breath, and not say or do anything that's critically rash at this time. What I want you to know is that even amid your fury or your fearfulness, the feelings of rejection and sadness, that it's just your head is pounding from all the thoughts that are going on. Your heart is hurting. You're feeling in pain. I'm hopeful that you have one or two people in your life that you can really lean on in this manner. These are the people who will keep you sane during the process. They're the ones who won't judge you or the situation, and they'll help you to keep perspective. Now, here's the second thing that you can do. Like before you meet with a professional person like a therapist or a counselor or a lawyer, I want you to have a conversation with yourself. And I'm a big one here about doing two different options. One is having a conversation with you and you in the mirror. I know that sounds kind of silly, but when we're talking to ourselves, we see ourselves differently. We look into our own soul in a way that is really gripping. And let's face it, if you're faced with a divorce right now, you're feeling gripped by your situation. You need to work this through. You need to engage yourself in all the fury and fear and anxiety that you have. You need to really understand how this is affecting you. When you look and talk to yourself in the mirror, the emotions will come flooding out, and it might be overwhelming. That's true, but I really think you need to have this conversation. Alternatively, you can put pen to paper. Either way, I want you to answer the following questions. You can also do this exercise with having your most trusted friend sitting near you or asking you these questions. And I have to tell you, there's something very poignant about this. It's something that I think you will remember as something really special if you have somebody that you can share that with. Therapists can do that with you when you get to them. But again, before you go, try answering these questions. Here's the first question. Have I done all I can think of doing to make this relationship work? Have I done everything I can think of to make this relationship work? Have you gone to therapy? Have you suggested couples therapy? Have you taken medication to manage your own anxiety and depression and despair so that you can be more even? Have you practiced yoga? Have you exercised? Are you watching your diet? Are you watching to make sure you're not drinking too much or doing anything in excess? Have you tried to make every invitation possible to your spouse or partner that you can think of in every way that you can think of to create change and growth in your relationship? If you've done all that and it's no go, then instead of being despairing, go ahead, be sad, but acknowledge to yourself that there may be nothing else you can do. Second, do I have a reason to think things will change or get better going forward? What is it that your spouse or partner has shown you by way of their capacity or willingness to change? Flip side of that is, what have you shown yourself about your capacity to change when given information you don't quite like hearing, feedback that makes you otherwise defensive? If you have no reason to think that there's going to be any substantive change going forward, this is going to be really difficult to stay in a relationship. If the history here is that you don't make change together, that you don't grow together, that you can't spur each other to that kind of growth, then it's going to be harder to stay in a relationship. Here's number 3. If I stay, what's the real cost to my health and well-being? It's a big one we don't really want to look at. If this is costing you physically and emotionally, if you're obsessing all the time, it's disrupting your sleep, creating pain, whatever. If the cost is huge to you as a human being, you may not be able to go forward. Number 4, if I stay, what's the real cost to the children? So the best way to tease this out is to do an honest appraisal of what the kids are learning by what they're seeing and experiencing. If they see and experience terrific amounts of conflict, then that should speak to you. If the conflict is manageable and the kids don't seem to be affected by it, then that may lead you in another direction. But either way, please pay attention to how your kids are responding and who they are. How do they manage stress and anxiety and change, and how do they adapt? You need to ask those questions of yourself. Number 5, if I leave this relationship, what challenges will I face? Will the children face? And do I have the strength to meet those challenges? I can't emphasize how important this is. You may have every good reason in the world to leave the relationship, really. But in terms of timing, if you don't have the strength to see this through, then that can complicate things quite significantly for you. Really do a good assessment of, can you do this? Do you have the strength? Do you really feel like there's no other choice? If there's no other choice, you'll find the strength. If you have a support system around you, you'll find the strength and you'll see it through. If you don't have the strength to do this, please have enough compassion for yourself to back off and reassess and re-engage when you do find that strength. If you've been faced with this dilemma before, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. Here's number 6. And I want you to consider this one a little bit differently because this is forward-looking. Can I imagine growing older with this person? So to help you do that, let's do a few quick thought experiments. I want you to close your eyes. And by all means, don't do this if you're driving. I want you to imagine that you're in your 80s. You're healthy, and you're sitting next to your spouse or partner. You find yourself asking, how content am I with the life we've made together? Did we have a good life together? Do I regret that I decided to stay? Do I have mostly good memories, or do I have sour ones? Am I looking forward to the remaining years ahead? It's a good one because even if you're in your 80s, you should still be looking forward to the years you have left together. If you're feeling that level of discontent or dread at this time when you're just reflecting, what do you think it's going to be like in real life when you're in your 80s? Here's another thought experiment. Imagine that the two of you are someplace special. It's special to both of you. It could be a museum, a beach, in a kayak, in some city or exotic or bucolic location. You each decide to go off on your own and do something for yourself, agreeing that you're going to meet later for dinner and discuss the time that you've spent by yourself together. Now, first question, are you relieved to have the time to yourself? Or are you looking forward to telling your spouse or partner about the experience of the day? Do you spend your time while apart worrying about what your partner's doing, if they're happy that you decided to spend the day on your own, or if they're angry or waiting for you to call? Will you feel comfortable sharing your whole experience with them when you see them, or will you automatically censor parts of it because you know they're not going to understand or they won't care? Here's one last thing to ask. Will they be happy for you? Or will they try to make you feel guilty or ashamed for wanting to spend time away from each other? To keep asking the question, how did this happen? is kind of fraught. I mean, you need to do it. You're going to do it. I can't tell you not to do it. But however you got here, it's really important to find a way to look forward, to have a path forward, to have a plan in mind about how are you going to construct your life, the kind of supports that you're going to need, the actions that you're going to take for you and your children that are going to help you get through this. Listen to me. It's normal for you to feel overwhelmed, bewildered, confused, to have information bopping back and forth inside your head and making you feel like you're going to explode inside, that your heart hurts so much you don't know how to contain the pain. This feels like a catastrophe, no matter how you got here. It could be a slow-moving catastrophe where you've just grown apart, or a major one where you've discovered an affair or a major financial betrayal. However you got here, our job is to help you move through this in a way that makes sense for you and your family. It's only you and your family. This is not about everybody else. This is your divorce, if you have one. It's no one else's. Hopefully it's the only one you'll have to tolerate and move through. It's the only one that your kids will have to tolerate and move through. But if you're at this point, you're going to be asking questions, and they're going to be repetitive. It's normal to obsess about this stuff. It's not just about feeling overwhelmed by feelings, it's about being overwhelmed by your thoughts. And you'll bounce all over the place. This is a confusing time. Most of us get held back in our decision-making because the feelings are so overwhelming that we feel immobilized. We feel stuck because we're telling ourselves we can't change the situation that we're in, or we don't have the resources to make the change, or we fear the consequences of staying or of going. So we do nothing. And we're waiting for something magical to appear, and it rarely does. So here's the thing. I need you to push through this time. Get your feet out of the muck and mire, that feeling of being stuck in molasses, and do something. You don't need an answer right now. You need a process. The process is seeing a therapist who can be assertive with you, somebody who's very interactive, and go see a lawyer or two. You don't need to retain them. You need to get information about what the process is, how they approach it. Therapist and attorney are very helpful at this point. You don't need to make a firm decision, but you need several processes that will help you get there.
Dr. Marc, we're back again.
Good to see you, Brian.
Good to see you. Today we are talking about how to respond if you're faced with divorce.
Yes. And this is something that for some is, they look at it like, well, it's not out of the blue. It's something that's been cooking for a long time, this decision. For others, they feel blindsided by the process.
Absolutely.
Either way, the feelings are very intense, everything ranging from betrayal to intense sadness to anger.
Yeah, and we are back with one of our parents from the first episode.
Yes, and I'm very eager to have that conversation with her.
Me as well.
I grew up very religious. We were in church 3 times a week, and I think that a lot of my interpretation of what was being presented to me was a very distorted view of that. There's just that one verse where it talks about wives submitting to their husbands, and I took that in the worst possible way. And so everything that he wanted, I'm submitting. I submit to you. You're the head of the house. You get what you want in every single detail. And so the concept of divorce had a lot of negative religious attachments as well. And it wasn't something that I wanted to ever have in my experience. I don't think any of us get married to people expecting that this is going to end badly. Like we have the dream of a beautiful life together.
I think when you grow up in a situation where religion and a certain definition of faith describes every element of your life and your worth, it's very difficult to establish your own identity, certainly your idea of separateness and togetherness in a marriage. Just don't consider those things simultaneously. You see yourself either as a supplicant to the union or to your spouse or as the person in charge. And all of that is very heavily determined by ritual. If you get encompassed in the ritual, for some people, they find that very comforting and they're okay with that. For others, it's a source of oppression and derogation, particularly if the other partner is kind of lording over you, which often happens. So people often use religion as a reason not to engage in partnership and not to regard their spouse as a partner. It's an amazing thing, but I see it over and again. The critical thing is that when it comes to divorcing, there's so much guilt and shame that's associated with wanting to have a break from this and wanting to see oneself after you think you've been taught not to do that. It's very hard to make the transition to selfhood. It's very hard to make the transition to giving yourself and your kids something outside the confines of what you've been programmed to believe.
Yes.
I have to say, I've done a lot of work with different clergy from different faiths in matters of divorce. And I always find it very interesting when you talk to many clergy, they will be very serious about the notion of what happens when somebody violates what should be the contract in the marriage. To honor, respect. Those are common kinds of things. When that gets violated, clergy are very assertive about, this marriage shouldn't last. When somebody's abusive, when somebody's controlling, when kids' mental health or physical health is at risk, they're pretty assertive. Is that that's not what we're teaching. That's not what the teaching is at all. So they're not averse to the idea of divorce when it makes sense to divorce, when people's mental health and their future is at risk. They understand that. That's not everybody, but I've met many clergy who are very compassionate in that regard.
Going back to the initiation, walk us through how the divorce got started.
I was awakening to it for a total of 3 years, but the last 8 months of that 3 years was when I was like, yeah, this is really not working unless there's some kind of miracle. And I really was struggling with why do I have to be the one to do this? Why can't this just be fixed? Why can't I just find some magic formula? I was really trying hard. And in the mornings, I would take my dog for a walk before anyone would wake up and go and walk her. And I loved the days where it was raining on these walks because I would pray out loud while I was walking and no one else was there. And I would just scream and cry and cuss and talk to God and be like, I need some help. Please help me. I need a sign. And I was making a conscious, intentional document on my phone. And after 8 months of that, I had 37 instances of things that were overwhelmingly dysfunctional and horrible that were said or done. And what I was hearing was, you've got 37 examples. Why are you asking me for more? Why are you asking me for more confirmation? You've got it. You don't need any more. And it was August, and it was the first week back at school. And I go to the playground after school with the kids, let them get their wiggles out, and talk to the parents. And there are dads on the playground. And so I make small talk, and I brought my dog with me to the playground, and a dad was petting the dog and talking to me. And then my ex had mentioned that he might come after school to the playground for just a minute to see the kids. And so he showed up while I was talking to this dad. And when we got home, there was a whole altercation about who the F is this guy, and why are we talking to him? And I know there's something going on between you and that guy. Something's fishy, something's not right. And by the end of that conversation, I just felt in my whole spirit that it was safe and it was time to tell him that I wanted a divorce. You're going to have to be out of here in exactly 1 week. And if you're not, then I'll take the kids and we'll go somewhere until you're gone. But I'm not pulling them out of their house. And he's hearing me say this, and I don't know. I guess I don't know what I thought his response would be, but it ended up that he just got down on his knees, like in the proposal position, and put his hands up in like a prayer. His exact words were, it's your behavior and the boundaries that you've set that are causing me to act this way. So like, don't do this because like, it's your fault. And I just was like, this isn't an apology. This isn't let me make it right. This is you blaming me again for things that I know are not because of me. So get up, and you have until Friday essentially to get out of here. You have to leave. Like, you have to go somewhere.
At what point did you file?
So I did end up filing in November, and you have a certain amount of time after filing that you have to serve the papers. And he wouldn't tell me where he was living. I didn't have an address for him, and our daughter's birthday is in November, and we were running out of time. So I had to have him served at our daughter's birthday party, which I really did not want to do, but that was the only place I knew he would be. So I worked with my attorney and my therapist, and we decided that we'd wait until after the party so that it wasn't actually the party and it wasn't causing a scene. He was still there cleaning up. But, and then I asked one friend and her husband to stand behind just to make sure that if he got upset, there was someone else there. And that's how he was served. And I feel bad, but I didn't have any other option at that point.
Right. It's a tough situation, and I think a lot of people who are listening have had a very similar circumstance. I'm wondering if you could share with us what the conversations were like with your kids from August going forward. How did you talk to them?
A lot of times, small kids specifically, they have big questions that maybe they're not ready to know the answers to. And so most of the time I just try to remember that and don't give them too much information, but I give them enough to say, like, what's important here is that we're all going to be fine. We're all going to be like on the same team. Like I've said many times before, we love you, and we're cheering for each other, and we're rooting for you guys. And so we're going to always do what's best for our family in that sense. And the rest of it, you'll just have to trust me until you're old enough to know more.
Ashley, I couldn't help but think when you talked about keeping that note on your phone with the 37 reasons. Are we doing anything with all of this?
Oh, yes, we are. I have a book coming out in April. It's a memoir. It's about all the crazy makers in my life, from my parents to my ex-husband, and many of the things that we've discussed today are talked about in detail. If anybody wants the true dirt, it's there.
Ashley, what's the title of the book?
It's called Maybe We're All Diamonds, and it's really just about learning how to find your sparkle when people keep trying to make it dull.
Thanks for joining us. It would be really cool if you could spread the word. You know someone who could use this? Well, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review, but also share more with somebody about our mission to help co-parents feel less alone. Please share this podcast freely. That's my shameless plug. For more tips and tools about how to navigate this time, please go to makesenseofthemess.com.